The wheels of the private jet touched down with a smooth, effortless glide, the soft screech of rubber against the runway barely audible inside the lavish cabin. Yet, despite the gentle landing, the atmosphere within the aircraft was anything but calm. A heavy silence hung in the air, a stark contrast to the easy laughter and casual conversations that had filled the space just hours earlier. No one had expected this flight to turn into a lesson on humility, yet every passenger who had witnessed the events unfold knew that they had just seen something profound. A man who had been ignored, dismissed, and underestimated had, without raising his voice or demanding recognition, exposed a painful truth about human nature: that respect should never be conditional, that arrogance is often a mask for insecurity, and that true power lies not in how much money you have, but in how you treat others. In America today, and in much of the modern world, we are often conditioned to judge people by external markers of success. We make assumptions based on appearances, what someone wears, what car they drive, what title they hold, without ever stopping to consider who they really are. This flight was a perfect reflection of that reality. Sophie Miller, like so many others, had fallen into the trap of valuing status over substance. She had seen Keanu's worn leather jacket, his simple backpack, and assumed he was beneath her. But what if he had been just an ordinary man? Would that have made her treatment of him acceptable? This is the question that lingers, not just for the passengers on that flight, but for all of us. Because the truth is, this kind of behavior happens every single day. Sophie Miller wasn't unique. We see her in the executive who dismisses a junior employee because they don't have the right credentials. We see her in the restaurant manager who treats a customer poorly because they don't look like they'll tip well. We see her in the hiring manager who overlooks a qualified candidate because they don't dress in designer brands. We see her in ourselves when we unconsciously judge people before we truly know them. And that is what made this flight so much more than just an embarrassing moment for one flight attendant. It was a mirror reflecting the ways in which we too can sometimes fail to recognize value in those around us simply because we are too focused on surface-level impressions. Liam Carter, the sharp-eyed investor who had watched the situation unfold from the beginning, turned to a fellow passenger as they exited the jet. "That wasn't just about one flight attendant," he murmured. His companion, a well-dressed businessman, nodded. "No," he agreed. "That was about all of us. Because the truth was, this wasn't just Sophie's mistake. It was a mistake many of them had made in different ways at different times in their lives. They had all been guilty at some point of dismissing someone who didn't fit their expectations. They had all assumed at one time or another that status was tied to wealth rather than to character. And they had all just been reminded, in the most unforgettable way, that they had been wrong. As news of the flight spread, because stories like this always do, people across the country began to talk. Social media exploded with discussions. "This is why you treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO. You never know who you're talking to. So treat everyone with kindness. Power isn't about money, it's about character." And while some people dismissed the story as just another viral moment, others took it to heart, because in the real world, the way we treat people matters. That security guard you barely acknowledge, he might be the one to help you in an emergency. That quiet coworker you ignore, they might be the person with the best ideas in the company. That customer you assume can't afford anything, they might be the wealthiest person in the room. And even if they aren't, does that mean they deserve any less respect? Keanu Reeves never sought to teach Sophie Miller a lesson. He never called her out, he never demanded better treatment. He simply existed, and by doing so, he allowed her to expose herself. That, more than anything, was what made this story so powerful. Because true power doesn't come from how loudly you speak, it comes from how strongly you stand. Keanu never needed to prove his worth. His actions spoke for themselves. And in the end, it was Sophie who had to face the consequences of her own choices. As Keanu walked through LAX, blending into the crowd as effortlessly as he always did, he carried no trace of the dramatic scene that had unfolded just moments ago. To him, this was just another reminder of something he had long understood: that status is fleeting, that wealth doesn't define a person, that character is everything. And as the passengers of that flight walked away, forever changed by what they had witnessed, one truth echoed in their minds: respect isn't something you give based on status. It's something you give because it's the right thing to do.